Sucked through the containment wall, I wake to find myself trapped inside the Olympic exclusion zone. To escape, I must uncover the secrets of not only the zone, but also its remnants. To increase my chances of survival, I will upgrade the car multiple times along the way, protecting us better against the anomalies inside the zone, as well as my absolutely atrocious driving. Without further ado, I am very excited to bring you guys my 100% playthrough of Pacific Drive. The game opens showing us some basic controls of the vehicle, such as operating the wipers and using the headlights, followed by me realizing why you keep your eyes on the road. Shortly after this, I am sucked through a random hole in the wall and wake up shortly afterward. After waking up and realizing that our previous car is now shredded, we begin looking for a new form of transportation, and stumble upon an old station wagon that we can hear voices coming from over the radio. Upon replacing the missing wheel, we are informed that we are in grave danger as the instability is creeping in, and if we don't find somewhere safe, we will meet a terrible fate. Choosing not to chance a terrible death, I follow directions relayed and barely make it back to the abandoned auto shop. Upon arrival, I activate the power and we are introduced to Oppy, who seems a little less than pleased by me breaking into her auto shop.
Who's there? The shop has been breached. You've got 5 seconds to get the hell out before I... Ow! My head.
Is now we learn that the voices heard inside the car earlier belong to Tobias and Francis, who suspect the car is a remnant, but any implications of this are kept rather vague for now. I grab a free backpack and the mechanic's eye, which functionally acts as a HUD. It also grants the ability to scan a variety of things inside the zone, including anomalies. I reattach the wheel that fell off the car upon arrival and pull it into the shop bay. From here, I am reacquainted with some basic information about the crafting station and tasked with collecting materials from the car out back. This is done using a scrapper provided by the friendly dumpster that resides beside the shop. Using this aptly named scrapper, I finish scrapping the car and use the materials to craft a new crew door to install onto the car. After depositing any extra resources into one of the provided lockers, I grab the repair putty inside, which I will use to repair any existing damage to the car. I then finally replace the flat tire with a spare from the locker and repair the loose tire by whacking it with a wrench, hopefully preventing it from falling off again. Oppy then provides me with some cardboard boxes, a crafting mat, and an arc device, all of which will be instrumental to our survival in the zone. Upon completing these final preparations, such as filling the car up with gas and recharging the battery, Oppy explains how to use the map to plan our very first excursion into the zone.
This is the zone. Within these borders, all matter has lost the ability to hold a constant physical state. What that means is the shape, size, and makeup of just about everything constantly changes. A mile of grass can turn into 10 miles of swamp in the blink of an eye, and it does. Constantly. It's caused by something we call instability. We're completely surrounded by it, and once you've watched it chew through entire mountain ranges, you'll understand that you don't want to get anywhere near it. We can only survive in here within pockets of stability. That's what you're standing in now. And that's what you're seeing mapped on the route planner. If we're going to find you a way out of the zone, you'll need to build a new antenna. Until then, you won't be able to detect stabilized routes beyond your immediate area. So, you've got to go hunting for parts, and that means taking a drive. Go on, pick a route. The arc device in your car will then show you where you need to go.
Now, I'm not sure I'd call one route choosing a route, but before you know it, we were on the road. Arriving to the first junction, I begin looting everything not tied down, and using these materials, I craft our first impact hammer, which I use to destroy these plasma generators for the resources. As I continue looting, Francis and Tobias make me aware of the complications around the remnant we are now bound to.
Okay. The remnants, in short, they're old objects that do all sorts of weird things. They bind themselves to people, and you're the latest victim. You and the car are inseparable now, so get acquainted. Once the remnant is bound to someone, they become gradually more obsessed with it. It takes over the victim's mind, until they go crazy and run off into the zone with it. No one has ever been able to resist its siren call.
That fixation is probably worming its way into your brain as we speak. This is the first time we've ever got our hands on one. But we know all about the past remnants, and oh gosh, this one time it materialized as an old copper kettle, and the tea that came out of that thing...
Oppy cuts Tobias off because he's beginning to go on a tangent, and I continue my looting, destroying more plasma generators and scanning my first anomaly. A tourist. I then immediately learn that if they're blocking a door, just leave them be. I then stop to grab some parts from a nearby radio station that Oppy requested, and accidentally drop it while trying to pick it up, almost getting shocked to death in the process. After patching myself up, I went back to the shock tower that nearly killed me to steal its plasma. It is then that I am informed by Oppy that we will need to collect anchors in the zone to charge the arc device that will return us to the shop. These are these little glowing balls that can be found throughout the zone, and returning them to the car charges the arc device. Upon collecting enough, the arc device is charged to open a gateway. Being sure to mention that creating this gateway will make the area we are in collapse, and to get out of there as soon as possible, before we get scrambled by the instability. So I open the gateway with the arc device, and make my way to it. And upon entering this giant ominous pillar in the sky, we are returned to the auto shop. Back to the auto shop, Oppy then grants us access to our fabrication station, which is where we can use anchor energy gathered on our trips to unlock upgrades for the shop as well as new crafting recipes. But for now, I just use it to craft us a scanner using the broadcast transmitter taken earlier from the radio station in the zone. After installing the transmitter on the roof of the shop, Oppy provides me with a handbrake to install in the car, as well as the transfer trunk from the friendly dumpster, which makes unloading the car much more convenient, especially if you have a large amount of stuff in the trunk. At this point, I noticed that I should have received at least one achievement already, and then realized that I'm actually missing 3 story achievements, one for planning our first route on the planner, second for installing the zone scanner, and third for our return to the shop after having scanned 5 anomalies. I also received the achievement Patent Pending after rebooting the game to fix the achievements, but I have no idea what the requirement for this actually was, as it was not clear, so feel free to comment if you know what exactly causes it, because I have no flippin' clue. Now, to get out of the zone, we need to confirm the car is indeed a remnant. To do so, Oppy wants us to go to the town of Serum, to a large anomaly known as Colossal Cappy, in hopes that it'll amplify the remnant signal enough to confirm or deny its existence. Before heading out, I take some time to craft some panels to replace missing ones and repair some damage with repair putty. Feeling ready for the trip, I head into the zone. On the way, scanning new anomalies and collecting anchors. While driving along, Tobias informs us what awaits us should this car be confirmed to be a remnant.
Road signs. The objects themselves would exhibit anomalous properties, but what
Didn't in the zone, right? That in itself wasn't cause for alarm. But these fixations would only grow worse, until its victims could think of nothing else but the remnant. And they always ended with spiraling into madness and disappearing in a mad chase after something. Sorry, driver, it doesn't sound fun, but better to know what you're up against.
During this conversation, I fail to realize that there's a railing wreck directly in the road, and we receive our first status effect of the run. Not having the materials to repair right now, I have to leave it as I don't really have any other choice, so I continue on. I then fail to realize that there's also a massive change in elevation on the map, and drive myself straight off a cliff. This results in me having to use the emergency teleport feature on the car, and almost slipping it again because I forget you can choose where to teleport the car. Did I mention that I only went down here to collect a frequency file, which doesn't even progress the story, it's simply a piece of lore. I stopped to make repairs while the file played, and then continue on route to Serum. On arrival, I did as I was asked and approached Cappy, but not before being smashed into a rock by an abductor and thrown off a cliff. Finally reaching Cappy, we are asked if we can get higher ground, as no reading was produced by the car and we need to get closer. Upon reaching this higher ground, with still no response, I am asked to drive the car straight into the core of this very large anomaly, and, being the good lab rat that I am, open the gate, sending the car straight into Cappy's core. Possibly against my better judgment, but I am rewarded with our first non-buggy achievement. Arriving back at the auto shop and slamming into the friendly dumpster, just like you should slam that like button down below. Shameless plug aside, I complete my routine of scrapping the body panels off the abandoned car, TV, and radio back. Gathering what I can from the friendly dumpster and repairing the car to the best of my ability. This routine becomes something I do basically every time I return to the shop, so this will be the last time I mention it. Just know that every time I return to the shop, I am slurping up all the loot available and patching up the poor car again before heading back out. Our next trip has no set objective, but we need to make a general trip into the zone to progress the story. And other than typical looting and scanning, the return trip was rather unremarkable. Outside, maybe my health getting a little bit lower than I like. In a shocking turn of events, upon returning to the auto shop, we receive an apology from Oppy for sending us into Cappy. And she's agreed to try and assist us with breaking their Remnant's connection with us before it drives us, no pun intended, to insanity. For the next incursion, I research steel sheets, which are the prerequisites for steel panels, allowing the research of steel panels and doors. With extra energy left over, I unlocked basic headlights and crafted the Matter Deconstructor, which allows us to scrap items no longer needed or worn out, returning a portion of the build cost in doing so. I also had enough materials to craft a matter generator, which repairs any car parts inside while out on a trip. I make quick use of this, placing some worn crude panels inside, and replace them with some newly unlocked steel panels. After filling the generator up completely, I scrapped any remaining crude panels for the materials and used those materials to craft even more steel panels, as well as 2 headlights. This leaves the car looking a little bit less janky, thankfully. The final thing I unlocked before heading back out was the outfitting station, which allows upgrading my backpack, as well as various other equipment that offers a range of environmental resistances. Unfortunately, I was 6 cloths short for a bag upgrade and would have to manage with the default bag for at least one more trip. The next trip had us returning Serum for a stabilizer map, along the way encountering our first repair station and a creepy new anomaly, alongside the usual looting and anchor collection. Arriving at the next junction, I encountered my very first gold shell tree, which, to be frank, are kind of useless. They require you to expose them to certain conditions to open, and reward you with very little loot. They do provide some cool decorative items for the garage, which is cool and all, but are really more annoying than anything else. So I will not be mentioning them again, even though I do open quite a few throughout the run. Reaching the observation tower and scanning the map reveals the stabilizer route forward. On the way, I make a quick stop for gas and loot what I can from the gas station before leaving the area. At the next junction, I am tasked with activating 3 stabilizers to open a gateway and return to the shop. I did, however, manage to run directly into a wriggling wreck, causing me to have to stop and repair the car, as well as scan a new anomaly along the way. Upon activating the last 2 barricades, I return back to the shop and receive the achievement, Stabilizing the Route. Back at the shop, you may now notice the screen is a little cut off. This is 100% my bad, and I was having some scaling issues which I fixed in about 7 minutes. If you wish to skip ahead, I will provide an exact timestamp on the screen as well. Sorry, guys. Having collected enough fabric, I craft a medium backpack, which for some odd reason lands on the floor, even though it also appears to be equipped. This strange entity is not able to be placed in the inventory or even scrapped. So I decide to leave it on the floor and go to scrap a very helpful dumpster pearl, receiving a decent chunk of sheet metal in return. This allowed me to craft steel bumpers for the car, as well as replacing the last crude panel with a steel one. After scrapping the old crude panels to free up space, I unlock and install the detailing station, which allows us to customize certain aspects of the car, and I used it to install a cute little doggo on my rearview mirror. Prepped and ready, I plan my next route into the zone. And while we're unable to reach the next story location immediately, I plan a route that will stabilize the way to the objective for our next trip. Leaving the shop, we get our first look at the almighty mirror doggo swinging away happily. On this trip, I also realize the dome light is on in the car, and begin suspecting that we have picked up our first quirk. I'll cover these in more depth shortly, but for now, I'll carry on as per usual. The trip begins rather uneventful, with some looting, followed by finding 2 beneficial anomalies, the happy hare and the beating heart. With despite their ominous names of the latter, they both heal the car in their own ways. This good fortune, however, did not remain for long, as after returning the car with an anchor, a bolt bunny, the not-so-friendly brethren of the happy hare, hopped into the car. And with the combination of the zone condition shocking speed, the car took off, and in my desperate attempt to stop it, I managed to get run over, receiving It-2 achievement? I don't know how to pronounce that, I'm sorry guys if I butchered it. I get back in the car, my ego and my legs slightly bruised. After finishing up some looting, I opened the gateway and encountered a strange canister on my way out, and against my better judgment, stopped to investigate. While the zone was very actively closing. I scan it, and after reading the resultant logbook entry, learn that it's basically a loot drop from Arda. So, decided to find a way to open it. And apparently, that took long enough for the zone to close in just enough to justify playing some very spooky, scary music. I took this as my cue to get the heck out of there, and upon departure received Eye of the Storm for leaving after the storm has completely collapsed. Back at the shop, I find the backpack is still glitching out as a box on the floor. Then continue to exchange some damaged parts with fresh ones from the generator, and slap some flexi on the panels that I didn't have spares for. Who would have thought that staying in the zone after the scary music started playing would be so damaging? Patching up best I could, I finally unlock off-road tires, circuit boards, and upgraded the antenna array so I can scan more routes on future trips. Deconstructing old tires in favor of the newly unlocked, much better off-road tires, I realized I do not have enough to craft a full set. Noticing I hadn't yet scrapped the car out back, that's an easy fix. Huh. How'd that happen? Thankfully, the friendly dumpster is always willing to bail me out of my bad choices and give us a spare. And while it's not particularly pretty, it'll get us back on the road. I then spent some time diagnosing the first quirk that I mentioned earlier. Quirks are conditions the car can pick up over time that cause a magnitude of things, anywhere from beneficial to downright infuriating. For example, you can get ones that cause all your wheels and doors to fall off on any condition such as driving forward or hitting a bump, or you can get ones that allow for increased speed. This dome light one lands somewhere in the middle, where it just annoys me enough to want it gone, but not actually harmful. Now, I had a fairly good idea it was being caused by one of the doors. So I walk around the car, opening and closing doors until I somehow completely miss it turning on. Watching this back, I have no idea how I missed it here. But I drove around the next run for about 10 minutes before I even realized it was on. Stopping quickly to grab a frequency file, I throw a flare, and while I'm not exactly sure if this was planned or not, I receive an achievement for distracting an anomaly. I then make very intentional use of the zone condition's shocking speed, this time to speed my car up past 88 miles an hour for another achievement. And to top it all off, we enter the gateway while in the air for another achievement. Not that these were accidental or anything. When I get back to the shop, I unlock the handvac, crude flashlight, and flare gun recipe. I was also finally able to diagnose the dome-like quirk, allowing me to resolve it for another, what should have been easy achievement. After completing the usual patchwork on the car that included repairing the awful state of our windshield, I opted to give the car a new paint job. I also managed to fix the aspect ratio issue, so sorry about that guys, but it should be good from here on out. I also used this time to replace the mismatched spare tire from earlier, then took a second to admire my work. And it's kind of hideous. What was I thinking? I didn't want to fix it right now though, opting instead of planning the next trip where I dispatched a group of tourists that were giving me the creeps. Outside the tourist eruption, this junction was much of the same, with some chill looting and some anchor collection. I cannot, however, say the same about the next. I'm not sure what I was thinking when I planned this trip, or if I was even thinking at all. But I can say it did not go very well, with me getting yanked into a rock seconds into arriving. It did, however, allow me to collect our first unstable anchor of the playthrough. These are normally found in the mid-zone, but due to the fact that this is a highly unstable area, we're able to find them here early, which is very nice. Due to this unstable condition though, I left shortly after due to the large amount of hazards. Back at the shop, I unlock a handful of miscellaneous items and upgrade my first locker to an expander locker, offering a ton more room for me to store my junk. On my next trip, I have my first close call with death in an attempt to kick a shock bunny off the car, which I failed miserably, having to retreat to safety. This, like many things in life, can be resolved by eating the pain away. Once healed up, I patch up the car and continue on to the next junction, where it is incredibly dark. One might even say it might be eerily dark. I was still able to locate a wildlife-friendly dumpster for some random items and some very much needed cloth. Once my pockets were stuffed to capacity, I was ready to return to the shop, and upon entering the gateway, I received the Juiced Up achievement for having doubled the required anchor energy to open a gateway. Returning to the shop, I unlocked the first engine upgrade as well as upgrade the shop vac. It will now automatically store any items picked up off the floor into the transfer trunk. I now realize I do not have the requirements for the new engine, and opt instead to plan my next route that will take me across the wall into the mid-zone, progressing the main story. Arriving at the wall, enter an old drain pipe and enter the inner wall. Making my way through, dodging shock towers and many tourists along the way, as I search for a way to the other side. Doing so successfully, I approach an old access road into the mid-zone, where my communication with Oppy fails.
Major interference in the air signal.
And upon arrival into the mid-zone, I am instead greeted by Tobias and Francis, who may or may not have had something to do with the communication issues.
Hello, friend. Welcome to our side of the wall. Oh, what's this? Your connection to Oppy is jammed? Worry not. Our signal is crystal clear.
A little bit obvious, don't you think?
Right, ask me if I can. Yeah, the mid-zone's been marinating in all this radiation for so long. Things don't work the same as they do in the outer zone. But the good news is, we live here. We can help you, no sweat.
And I don't know about you, but they seem pretty innocent. After the brief reintroduction, I slipped my first marsh eggs, which not only push the collector to the logbook entries past 300, unlocking another achievement, but are also a resource unique to the mid-zone and are useful for a variety of crafting recipes. So I try to slurp up as many as I can find while I'm here. I also originally thought these big red glowy balls would hurt me, but did my best to avoid them. But apparently they are completely harmless. I was able to confirm this by giving one a few swift kicks, for scientific purposes, of course. Making my way forward through the understandably very wet swamp, I accidentally sent myself skyward, but also managed to find our very first corrupted energy. Usually these are only found in the deep zone, so I will take what I can get. Having collected enough resources to satisfy my inner loot goblin, I activate the stabilizer and make my escape, receiving 2 more achievements along the way. The first for returning from the mid-zone for the first time, and the second for traveling through 4 junctions without breaking or replacing a car part. Quite shocking considering my driving abilities. Back at the shop, Francis and Tobias agree to patch Oppy back in. But first they want me to snoop around Oppy's office to see what I can find. And out of everything to find, I find a bathroom. Understandably confused, I start interacting with everything I could, which eventually causes a hidden door to reveal itself. Inside, I find a hard drive and an arc dock. Sending the hard drive over to the boys for another achievement, I then go install the arc dock into the car for myself. This will be a very helpful tool in the rest of the run, as you will see shortly. My next incursion into the zone aims to discover where in the deep zone might hold the secrets needed to free myself from the Remnant. As I prepare to leave, I notice Doggo appears to be having some sort of problem. Overall, this run was typical. Got some loot confetti from a dumpster, but then... Whoa, 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 oh shit. Yeah, I have no idea what happened here, but I would like for it not to happen again. Healing what I could with food, I chose to make use of the art dock received earlier. In short, it's an ability for the car that can be used battery to heal the character. So, I use what battery I can spare to heal out of critical range. I then, with my expert observation and driving skills, drive straight into a writhing wreck moments after, which destroyed the integrity of the car, including afflicting the engine with a status effect, for good measure. After relocating the car to a safer location, I fixed what I could using a repair putty I had on hand, and the engine with a mechanic's kit I had in the trunk. The car was still in rough shape, but hopefully should buy me a little bit more time. But with no more repair items, I'll have to be a little bit more careful moving forward. Well, at least I got an achievement. I seem to have this uncanny ability to run directly into anomalies and never learn from these mistakes. I guess it keeps things interesting at the very least. Reaching the mural, both me and the car low on health, that when I see a giant meatball heading my direction, I decide to turn and run. My goal here is to scan 3 murals that were painted by our Remnant paint can of all things, that bound to someone many years ago. This went fairly well, which is great news because both me and the car were in pretty rough shape. I opened a gateway as soon as I finished scanning the murals. However, the call for loot in my brain overpowered me despite my health situation, so I did make a quick stop. I still managed to make it out in one piece, which required me another story achievement. Healing my rather severe wounds back at the shop, I am tasked with reaching an old research facility to hopefully uncover something to assist in freeing myself from the Remnant. After planning a route, I used the outfitting station to craft powered boots to reduce fall damage, hopefully preventing what happened last time. From here, I upgrade the workbench to level 2, allowing crafting of more complex items, then scrap the old worn out engine for a few materials in exchange for another base tier engine in slightly better condition from the friendly dumpster. After completing a few more trips to gather more resources and expand the available map area, using these resources I was able to unlock a few new blueprints and use them to craft and install a side battery, increasing our overall battery capacity. I also crafted and installed a lightning rod that will provide a means to charge batteries in storms as well as from electric anomalies. I crafted and installed a fax machine so I can later store log files that I've collected and will collect during my adventures. I also crafted a seat rack, basketball hoop, and upgraded the matter deconstructor so now I can throw stuff into it from across the shop. Not very useful, but pretty fun when it works. Then, finally diagnose some quirks and plan a route to the next objective. This run, I spend a large amount of time looting to replenish my spent resources. I also get the chance to loot my very first thermostat crystals. These are another exclusive mid-zone resource that will finally allow us to craft the upgraded engine, among other useful things. While looting, I managed to find a liberator, which allows me to liberate car parts from abandoned cars, and I use it to receive the They Weren't Using achievement by liberating a panel from a car, then installing it on my own. I then continue searching for a way into the facility, and eventually find what I'm looking for. An off-the-book section of the laboratory where Oppy tasked me to scan any data I can find. After collecting all the data, I encounter a resource tree behind an invisible wall. After struggling for a bit, I do give up and continue on to the stabilized route. Upon arrival, I use previously collected anchor energy to open a gateway and receive the Red Willow Records achievement. Back at the shop, Oppy provides a blueprint for a limb shield, which I immediately craft, as not only is it required to progress deeper into the zone, it is also incredibly useful for general protection. After installing the limb shield, I unlocked armored doors, panels, and wind turbines to assist with keeping the limb shield powered. I also had enough materials to finally craft the next upgrade for the trunk, increasing storage capacity. Scrapping a few of the old steel panels in favor of upgraded armor panels, this adds some survivability and peace of mind for my journey into the deep zone. On my way out, I ensure the limb shield is set to an ability hotkey. Upon arriving to the final mid-zone junction, I take a brief stop to repair what I can of the car and make the final stretch into the deep zone. Now, the deep zone is a whole different beast from the rest of the zone, with all sorts of hazards, but also new and essential resources to harvest. But for whatever reason, instead of treading carefully, I decided this was the time to kick a tourist for the achievement Nothing Personal Zone. And while it wasn't the most damaging, I'm still questioning my train of thought here. Follow up with a more reasonable decision to grab some deep zone exclusive resources, and then begin my search for a non-deep zone specific resource. Yes. I somehow didn't manage to bring any extra, or even add an additional tank before making this long journey. I did manage to find some after some exploring on foot, and while the amount wasn't large, I believed it to be enough to get us through the next sequence. So I flip the switch in the nearby tower and initiate the charge sequence. And off we go. Now you can see why the limb shield was needed for this section, as the game has us driving along hazardous routes using the arc device to link the gates. This is done simply by driving next to these electric capacitor things while avoiding hazards where possible. Along the way, the battery banks we are using begin to fail, so Tobias goes outside into the instability to service the banks on their side of the zone, effectively sacrificing himself to the instability.
I got you, Oppy. Friends. Well, what do you know? One time, I find myself out of things to say. Oppy, take care of him for me.
Tobias!
Francis, I love you forever.
I love you forever.
After this gut-wrenching moment, we arrive into a deep zone junction which houses a stabilizer that I will use later to return to the garage. Before making my way back though, I take some time to grab some more deep zone loot such as explosives, corrupted energy, and limb magnets which are produced rather than found. This is done by placing the scrap metal inside these giant magnetizers, which are only found in the deep zone. I return to activate the stabilizer and leave through the gateway, receiving yet another achievement, albeit with a heavy heart. At the shop, I craft an additional side rack for the car, along the usual unlocking new recipes. This time I focus on fuel tanks after the fuel issues last time. With these blueprints, I craft and install an expanded backseat tank and craft another wind turbine for an empty side rack, ensuring the limb shield will have plenty of juice to keep me safe on our journey. And if that doesn't work out, at least have the power to heal my wounds with the Arc Dock. While out on a trip collecting thermosap crystals, I get some car doors thrown at me, and not even good doors either. Like, come on. Once back at the shop, I upgrade the matter regenerator. This will allow me to repair many more car parts at once while I'm out on my trips, which will hopefully save me spending some time repairing, not to mention large amounts of repair putty. I also finally had enough resources to craft a turbolight engine, which is a long overdue update from our base engine, which swiftly met its fate in the deconstructor. Along with the engine upgrade, I also had enough to fully outfit the car with armored panels, which awarded the Car Thesis Achievement for having replaced all original parts of the car. I took this as the perfect opportunity to paint the car a less awful color scheme, and added some art decals to complete the look, which at least, in my opinion, was pretty clean, and so much better than the red. With the car looking great, I unlocked the Plasma Scrapper to bring with me on the next trip, which you may have guessed is an upgraded version of the Scrapper which gets higher resource yield from deconstructing items in the zone. Now for the next story mission, all I had to do was return through Deep Zone Gateway, so I set out on a normal trip, ensuring to grab as much loot as I could carry along the way, as I will need everything I can get my hands on to fully upgrade the garage for the Garage Barrage achievement. Returning to the shop, Oppy sends a mod for the Arc device that will allow it to be overcharged, hopefully allowing me a safe return from whatever lies ahead of us. On my way back into the Deep Zone, I stopped to loot some stuff, and upon re-entering the car, received the Driver's Ed Dropout achievement for failing to put the car in drive a whopping 20 times before I hit the gas. I also received renewable energy for charging the car from below half battery to full, using only natural energy sources. In this case, the wind turbines that I had equipped earlier. This was shortly followed up by Long Haul for driving what the devs deem an exceptional distance. Upon finally making it back to the auto shop, I realize our beautiful new engine has been damaged and has picked up a status effect from our terrible driving. And as I go to craft an electrician's kit to repair it, I realize that not only do I not have the blueprint unlocked, I am so low on stable energy from other unlocks that I don't even have the energy to unlock it. Slightly annoyed, I take a quick peek at the logbook and see what ramifications leaving it may have, and while annoying, I wouldn't say the issue is going to be a major concern to my safety within the zone. Even if it was, I can't really do anything about it anyways. I did, however, have enough corrupted energy to unlock the limb chip, and more importantly, the magnetic hammer, which not only offers the highest resource yield to any tool in the game, it is also required to mine Olympia, a very useful late game resource, which I'm able to collect on my next run. Returning from this run back to the shop with the required energy I needed to finally unlock the electrician's kit, as well as adding the junction re-stabilizer. This allows us to use scanner charges to reroll undesirable zone conditions, such as bad junction conditions or low resource density. I then, in effort to get more fabric, which has been a continual struggle throughout this run, recycled duct tape. And while I do not receive fabric, I receive the achievement I don't know what I expected instead. I also finally install all the records I've accumulated over the last 20 hours into the fax machine to clean up my lockers, and then unlock the junction bypass, which allows me to skip highway junctions, making runs deeper into the zone not only easier, but also much, much safer as well. The next thing I set my sights on is the repair station. This, I would say, is probably one of my favorite things to have, as it repairs a car every time you return to the shop. And while I may not fully repair a heavily damaged car, it will save me so much time in the future. Unfortunately, I am short on scrap metal, so I turn to scrapping anything around the shop that isn't being used, such as sheet metal and other crafted items not being used anymore. I still fall short in the scrap metal and decide to upgrade the antenna instead, which is a decision I will grow to regret. Not because it's not useful, but because it eats away so much of my spare scrap metal. After finishing the housekeeping, I set back out into the zone for more resources, returning 40 minutes or so later to scrap anything I can for my trip. With this, I am finally able to craft the beautiful repair station, which also unlocks the achievement DIY Expert. And like, isn't she just beautiful? Like, look at all that passive healing. On my next trip, I was supposed to be headed to the deep zone, but I did mess up my pathing a little bit, so I missed the junction for my next story mission. The trip, however, was not wasted, as I collected a full inventory, both trunk and backpack, of resources before returning to the shop. During routine maintenance, I find the trusty backseat tank has a leak and is overall worn out, so it meets the deconstructor and is replaced by 2 new ones. I then take a brief minute to kick the crap out of the poor car for the troubleshooting achievement. Heading back into the zone, I was a little bit more careful to read the road map closely and arrive at the proper junction this time, where I scan a barricade map for Francis and begin leaking all the barricade gates. This is very similar to the process in the other mission earlier, where Tobias sadly passed away, so I won't cover it again. Upon completion and on my way to the gateway, I drive off yet another cliff in true Brainrock fashion and receive an achievement for completion of the mission. Not for flying off the cliff. That was just a mistake. When I get back to the shop, Francis asked me to bring Tobias's favorite bobblehead along with us for our final journey, which I obviously oblige. Like, just look at this cute little guy. I also take the time to equip decorative items in the rest of the slots of the car for another achievement, accompanied by a final coat of paint to bring everything together. In my final preparation, I unlock the final armored blueprint for the bumper, and the car is looking pretty freaking sick in my opinion. Heading into the zone, Minnie Tobias by our side, unsure of what awaits us as we barrel deeper and deeper into the zone. And before you know it, we arrive. There it is. The well, the source of the mass hallucinations. As we approach, it opens, almost welcomes us, probably to the shock and or maybe horror of Francis and Oppy, but I come this far, so there's no turning back. I drive into the core. The following is a very story-heavy sequence, and in the interest of not ruining the ending, I'm going to skip over this section as I feel it's something worth possibly experiencing yourself if you are enjoying the game so far. After this section, I arrive back to a road with the car running in wait. Oppy and Francis are on the radio, urging us to get out of there as soon as possible, as the well is closing. So naturally, I take this as the perfect opportunity to send the car barreling into the air, tumbling down a slope. I did still manage to land on all 4 wheels though this time. Leaving the well, I received the final story achievements. First for completing the game, and second for taking Tobias along for the ride. I return to the shop, free of the Remnant. The car and I remain bonded, but it will no longer drive me deeper into insanity. This leaves me to explore the zone as I please, to discover its secrets, finish the last achievements, and maybe most importantly, loot everything in sight. This time under the leadership of Francis. As Oppy deems, her time in the zone is finished. Possibly due to something that occurred during the sequence I skipped. Who knows? From here, I spend some time cleaning up the shop, including recycling duplicate decals for extra fabric, as I'm still desperately short supply. I use this newly acquired fabric to craft the final trunk upgrade. Like, just look at all this wonderful space. I also happen to stumble upon an awesome quirk, that is also kind of ridiculous. Whenever the wipers turn off, the car jolts forward. This allows for some ridiculous speeds to be achieved, which I discovered on my next run into the zone. These runs, however, had no set goal, and I mainly focused on looting everything that wasn't screwed down, as I still needed lots of basically everything to fully upgrade the shop, and will continue to need lots of fabric and anchor energy for blueprints as well. While out on my adventures, I quickly learned that with great speed comes great responsibility, and swiftly flung myself into orbit, after hitting an inconspicuous bump on the road. I also learned that acid waterways are not just acidic to the car. I don't really know what I expected to be different than that, but I accepted it anyways. Returning to the shop with a sizable haul, I was able to unlock a solid number of blueprints and shop upgrades, including one of my favorites, the incident board, my first parts locker. And while these are not particularly useful from day-to-day gameplay, as late game lockers have infinite storage, they are sometimes nice to keep some car parts in that maybe you don't want to scroll through an entire pneumatic locker, because it does get a little bit excessive if you don't organize. And on my next trip, I received Art a Lore Keeper for having exceeded 600 logbook entries throughout our game. Returning to the shop from the trip, I made a truly unfortunate mistake.
No. No. Oh, no. That was not what I wanted. My speed.
Yep, I just fixed the one good quirk instead of the one I had meant to. Moving on from that strategy, I craft an amp engine that will make our next achievement, running on empty, much easier. After installation, I realized the car still has too much fuel, so I replaced the old turbo light and stashed the other one in the trunk for the time being, so I can replace it on the road when the tank runs dry. In prep for this trip, I had our final side rack and turbine receiving fully outfitted for having something installed in every slot of the car. The next trip goes according to plan, the car runs out of fuel, and switch over the engines, which will have us primed for the next run for an easy achievement. I did get slightly distracted on my way back to the shop by a magical loot box that wasn't even that great. Heading immediately back into the zone, not only to claim running on empty, but also no parking, where I have to make a trip without ever being in park. I had planned to do this earlier in the run, but kept slamming into the park at least once per trip out of habit. I was, however, during this trip, able to pick up a happy hair and drive around in circles for a few minutes for the watch out for hop-ons achievement. So all I had left to do was make sure I did not put the car in park when I hopped out for anchors, and that means we were able to make 3 achievements in one rather short trip. Next up, I had with the top down, which basically had me strip the car down to nothing and make a run with 3 junctions. When taking the panels off, I scrapped any panels that were worn out so they could be replaced with fresh ones on my return. I replaced the arc engine with the turbo light as well so I could save energy for any arc dock usage. As if the car can't protect me from my bad driving, it sure as hell better be able to heal me. To round off the preparations, I replaced all 4 tires with brand new ones to minimize the risk of flats or any other issues in the zone. And after a few more unlocks, I feel ready to hit in the zone. It was really strange driving around with no panels, but overall the run was going pretty well. And I managed to grab a couple of anchors all without issue. However, this did not last long, as on the final anchor needed to open the gateway, the anchor got grabbed by a bubblegum anomaly, yanking it out of my hands and into some hot mist. Luckily, I was able to use flares to distract them and get them to drop the anchor, allowing me to dash in and grab it. I was then able to return to the shop without further issue and claim my achievement. I reattached all the panels onto the car and crafted a roof rack. This will be needed for the pack rat achievement. My next goal outside of filling up the 150 Greek slots for the pack rat achievement was to travel through 7 junctions for roads ahead. The latter was quite simple to complete in the next run, but I couldn't quite loot enough for pack rat. Back at the shop, I was able to use the resources to add the last parts locker for Garage Barrage, which seemed kind of wrong since I didn't get the deco vent or fish tank yet. During the next trip, I found an anomaly that I hadn't scanned yet, which has gotten pretty rare. I took the chance to collect Scientific Pursuit, where I waited for the storm to start closing, scanned the unknown anomaly, and nothing happened. Game what? It literally says when the storm is approaching. This is approaching. Luckily, I still had a chance. This time making sure that I was the one that started the instability. I waited for the storm to close, waited for the storm to go past me, and scanned a blacksmith anomaly. What a relief. If this didn't work, I would have been pretty upset as I would have had to start a new game. Wouldn't that be annoying? When I get back to the shop, I was wondering if I could cheese the pack rat achievement by taking stuff out of lockers and throwing it into the car, and sure enough, it did. Feeling good about my genius, I thought maybe I could force the certified mechanic achievement by choosing to crash my car into the wall outside the shop. After taking all the front panels off so the engine would take more damage, I gave it a go. Now would you look at that? It worked. I then spent another 5 minutes or so trying to do the same thing and finally concluded that the effects must have a minimum cooldown between each one. Unfortunate, but oh well. I strip all the panels off the car again so I can head into a nearby junction and accidentally get shocked to death, which results in us returning to the shop with our car in shambles. But since I took all the car parts off, not much was lost. Returning back to the junction I died in, finding a remnant ghost, and looting the few items I left there for the Grave Robber achievement. While completing all these achievements, I also made a conscious effort to plug away on Lumberjack while out and about. Apparently bashing all these trees also had the benefit of causing another status effect on the engine, allowing for the completion of Certified Mechanic as well. After checking our status on a few of the achievements, I continue back to the shop and continue unlocking new blueprints, as well as the fish tank and the deco van because it felt wrong to leave them out. Honestly though, I kind of wish I had. These fish are not what I anticipated at all. I was looking for some nice blue water, cute little fish, but I got this instead. I guess I shouldn't have expected much different in a place like this. From here, I keep making trips, smashing into as many trees as possible, and receive Lumberjack. And a short time later, DIY Master, which is done by using these materials collected during all these trips, leaving me with one last achievement. Just walk it off. This achievement was a little bit more difficult to find the correct conditions for, but after a little bit of searching and some careful trip planning, I was finally able to shock acid burn, and then bonk my head with the car all within a minute. It is now that I realized that I had to go back and make a new game for those achievements mentioned earlier due to the bug. And there it is. This is my 100% playthrough of one of my favorite games of all time. I hope you all enjoyed. If you guys did, you know what to do. And I'll see you in the next one.